Business news now. It's that time of year when thoughts turn to summer holidays, at least in Europe and the US. But be warned, travellers may endure chaos on their way to their final destination. Britain's Heathrow has announced a cap on passenger numbers following similar moves at European airports as carriers struggle to replace staff culled during the pandemic. Meanwhile, travellers to Croatia will need to stock up on euros from next year as the country has been given the go-ahead to join the single currency. Joining me now to discuss the day's business headlines is Arise correspondent Laurie Laird. Let's start with Heathrow Airport. Pretty dramatic announcement. Why have they taken this unusual step?
Well, Heathrow has finally admitted that they have too many people. They don't have enough staff to handle all of the people that are streaming through the airport. It really was quite a shocking announcement. Heathrow says about 104,000 people are heading through the airport every day. They say that they can only handle 100,000. So for those 4,000 people, unlucky people, they won't be traveling at all. Heathrow has also asked airlines to stop selling tickets for this summer. Now, whether they have the authority to do so, whether the airport can say, please, BA, don't sell any tickets. We know this is how you make your money, but you can't sell any more tickets. Whether they have whether that's in their gift to make that request is an open question. But for certain, I'm not going anywhere near Heathrow this summer if I can avoid it.
But it's hard. It's one of the world's busiest airports.
Absolutely, and schools are breaking up. Parents want to get away with their kids. People haven't been traveling for so many years. And that's part of the problem, because during the pandemic, when people weren't traveling, Heathrow itself, the airlines, just cut back on staff, despite the fact that they were qualified for furlough money. So they qualified for some money from the government to keep people staffed. This was the whole point of the furlough regime, was to make sure that when things recover, that people still had their jobs. The airlines didn't do that. Heathrow didn't do that. And it's not just Heathrow. Airports around the globe are having this trouble.
So before we get to the other airports, so where does the blame lie? Does it lie with Heathrow or the airlines selling too many tickets?
Depends who you ask. Because both are blaming each other. And it looks like there's a little bit of both. Certainly, the airlines themselves have been accused of not having enough ground staff, not having enough baggage handlers, check-in people, and then the airports don't have enough security people, border control. And the problem is that you can't just fire these people and hire thousands and thousands. You need security clearance before you can work at an airport. So it takes a while between hiring somebody and having them cleared and trained up and being on the floor of the airport. So this is not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. This cap on numbers at Heathrow will last until September.
And Heathrow, as you kind of hinted at, isn't the only airport to limit passenger numbers.
That's right. And different airports are taking different ways of doing it. Schiphol in Amsterdam has done something similar, limiting the numbers through. What Lufthansa, the German flag carrier, has done is they've stopped selling cheap tickets. They're only selling their high-margin, profitable tickets. So if you want to fly to Frankfurt and back, it's an hour and 15-minute flight, probably cost you about $1,000 US. So different airlines, different carriers, different airports are trying to tackle this in very different ways. America's not immune either. There has been a real shortage of pilots. Pilots are very well paid in the US. When the airlines were suffering during the pandemic, they cut a lot of very, very expensive pilots. They now can't replace these pilots quickly enough.
So will these cutting of these flights, when it hurt the bottom line for these companies?
It's a really good question. Of course it will. If they cannot sell tickets, it's going to be difficult for them to stay in business. We already had SAS, the Scandinavian Air Service, go into bankruptcy protection in the US last week. European airlines are not all that profitable, and I think this will certainly hasten consolidation of the European air industry. Not so much in the US, because the air industry in the US is already extremely concentrated. There are really only 4 large carriers. They will do fine. American Airlines, in fact, came up earlier this morning and said, we're going to make £1 billion or $1 billion profit in this quarter. So they're rebounding quite nicely. They don't have as much competition, but certainly you're going to see some failures in European airlines this summer, without a doubt.
And is this the beginning of the end of the sort of cheap getaway, no frills airline? Is that sort of era coming to an end?
That's a really good question. And certainly I'd say the cheaper your flight, the more likely that flight will be to be canceled. The airlines aren't necessarily, the European carriers aren't going to cut their North Atlantic traffic, their long haul traffic. That's where they make their margins. So it's these short haul holiday flights that probably face the biggest risk of cancellation.
And just quickly, what help is there for passengers whose flights are cancelled?
This is a real tricky one because, again, there's a real blame game going on here. The airlines are saying, look, it's not our fault. There aren't enough people at Heathrow Airport, at Gatwick Airport, at Schiphol Airport. The airlines are saying, no, it's not our fault. It's, everyone's blaming each other. It's not clear where the responsibility lies. Certainly, if your flight is cancelled, the airline is obligated to put you on another flight or to refund your money. But I would really advise get a good travel insurance policy because there's so many people who will be badgering the airlines looking for compensation, looking for refunds. They won't receive those refunds anytime soon. I think an insurance policy is in order here.
Let's move on to Croatia. They're going to join the Euro.
It's such a popular holiday destination this time of year.
They're going to join the Euro in January, even as other countries, as we've seen here in the UK, have been moving away from the European project thanks to Brexit. Explain the significance of this.
Well, I mean, it really is interesting seeing a smaller country move toward the euro, and this is a source of great pride in Croatia. A number of countries have applied to join the euro, and only Bulgaria, Romania, only Croatia got through this round. They'll adopt the euro in January, but it may not necessarily be such good economic news for Croatia. Once you're in the euro, you lose the ability to set interest rates that may suit an individual country. In Croatia, inflation's at almost 11% right now. It's a record high since Croatia became an independent country. That would suggest that Croatia needs higher interest rates than the rest of Europe. They won't be able to do that. So that may mean if Croatia wants to get inflation under control, they're going to have to cut government spending. May it be difficult with people who are struggling with inflation. And of course, the income in Croatia is less than half the European average. So if government spending can't make up the difference, might be a tough time for Croatians.
And we saw what happened with Greece when it joined the euro and all the...
Absolutely, and that's such a good example because this is the problem. Once you join the euro, you can set your what's called fiscal policy within some parameters. The EU does insist that spending be kept below certain caps, but countries give up their ability to set their own interest rate policy, and the interest rates are largely set for conditions in France and Germany and some of the bigger countries. So some of these smaller peripheral countries have really suffered because they can't set interest rates anymore. It's a big commitment. It's a big step.
And all this comes on the day that the euro has reached parity with the dollar, something we'd never seen.
We never thought we'd see this. This is a record low since the euro was formed. And let's go back to the I word. Let's go back to inflation. A cheaper euro does fuel inflation. Everything that's imported into Europe that may be priced in dollars, things like oil, things like metals, they become a lot more expensive for a region that's already suffering from very high inflation.
Let's turn to the UK leadership, the race to succeed Boris Johnson. We understand 8 contenders in the race have now made it to the next round.
Right. And then there were 8. There were 10 this morning.
There was 11 this morning and then 10. What more can you tell us about the developments that we've been hearing over the last few hours?
The surprise is that the former health secretary, Sajid Javid, didn't make it through. Looks like you needed
the first one who resigned.
The guy who put this entire process in motion didn't get through, and it's a little surprising because when he was in the cabinet, he's an ex-chancellor of the Exchequer, ex-finance minister, ex-health minister, and was really regarded as sort of the grown-up in the room. In a
scandal really around him.
No, he's one of the cleanest people in government. He's thought of as extremely competent. So surprising that he couldn't muster the parliamentary support. Now, he pulled out of the race. It's not clear why he did that, but the assumption is he didn't have the backing of 20 of his fellow MPs.
And with the 8 candidates we've got left, we've got Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, Jeremy Hunt, Penny Mordaunt, Rishi Sunak, who is still...
You're doing this off the top of your head. Very well done.
Well, I have a computer. But Rishi Sunak is the leading candidate at the moment. Is he still the man to beat?
Probably, but the bookies at the moment have him tied with someone called Penny Mordaunt, who's a little bit less well known, but she's held a couple of ministerial positions. But yes, Sunak looks to be the man to beat at the moment. Interesting, you mentioned Kemi Badenoch.
Of course.
She's the child of Nigerian immigrants. And she did a speech today, an interesting speech, where she pledged to rip up all of the UK's climate commitments, all of the emissions targets. She said the UK, we can't afford it right now, is essentially what she's saying. But at the back of the room when she gave this speech was a man called Michael Gove. Michael Gove, a very well-respected Brexiteer, also another one of those grown-ups in the room as part of the I was about to say Donald Trump, Boris Johnson's cabinet.
He lingers
absolutely. But for Michael Gove to publicly support Badenoch is very, very interesting. I think she's in with a better chance than many people think.
But of course, they're making these, some would say, outlandish claims of what they're going to do in government. Is that because they need to appeal to the Conservative base? Because obviously when these candidates are whittled down to two, they're chosen by Conservative members and not the wider electorate.
I'm so glad you brought this point out because it's so very important. And you're right, every candidate is talking about tax cuts. And they're not talking about helping the most vulnerable people in society when inflation is so high. They're
Cost of living crisis,
but they're talking about things that will affect the entire spectrum, every socioeconomic group. And it's for the reason that you say, once the list is whittled down to two, it will be Conservative Party members who will vote. There are only about 100,000 of them. They tend to be more male, they tend to be older than your average voter, they tend to be wealthier than your average voter. So talking to them about increasing benefits is just, it's not going to go anywhere at all. So that's why we're hearing a lot of talk about lowering national insurance contributions, tax cuts that will affect the whole of the population.
It's going to be a fascinating race. But for the moment, Arise business correspondent Laurie Laird, thank you.